Draymond Green's talking about an NBA championship.
The hype around CJ Carr has been building since the day he committed.
The Florida Gators have hired their secondary coaches.
Jair Alexander's career in Green Bay looks all but over.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
T. Higgins in stripes? Well, the Bengals, they plan on franchise tagging T. Higgins.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast.
James, today we talk about news that you broke, that T. Higgins is expected to be franchise tagged. You have some more information around that, some context that we can share. And let's start with the very simple part of this, which is that T. Higgins, now with the second straight franchise tag for $26 million and some change, is set to be a Bengal if the Bengals choose for T to be a Bengal in 2025. That's pretty much it. They use a franchise tag. That's how the franchise tag works. And now we'll see whether it's an extension, whether there's a potential trade to be explored in the future. But the first step, and I feel like we've talked about this in the last week, but for anyone who hasn't seen the shows, was franchise tagging T.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, and thank you. Getting this report and getting the information, I'm not sure it shocks any of our listeners, our regulars, our everydayers. By the way, shout out to the everydayers. It may shock some other fan bases across the league that may be watching right now on YouTube. This was pretty much expected in Cincinnati, and it's because of a few factors. And we can break those down. I mean, from the fact that Joe Burrow calls T. Higgins a need in December, after on December 8th, I think it was the 8th, December 8th or 9th, after that Monday Night Football game against Dallas, praising T, saying he wants T back long-term, saying there's a plan in place. That's where all of this started and all of this momentum. And I think that started behind the scenes, but that is where it's like, all right, well, the path to T coming back long-term, it begins there, at least publicly. And I think the T being tagged at some point and the possibility of that is a big factor here. Because if I would have told you 6 months ago that they're going to tag T again, I think a lot of people would say, oh, well, this is because of a tag and trade. And that's the path that they're going to go down. I'm not sure. In fact, it's more than not sure. That is not the case, at least as of now. And I think the hope is a long-term deal. And we can get into all of that. But a second straight tag for T. Higgins, he'll make $26.18 million is the projection this year. If he doesn't get a long-term deal done, if they don't get a long-term deal done with him, and it's a step that at least keeps him away from the open market, where he would certainly get $30+ million per year. Clearly the top free agent wide receiver, clearly would have sent some shockwaves through the NFL if he signed elsewhere. He's not going to sign elsewhere because he's not going to hit the market.
Some shockwaves sent anyway today with the Bengals, well, with the report that you have here that we get for once from a local media member. So I'm just going to reiterate that for you, James, and pat your back a little bit here, because honestly, we often get the question, like, why is it never local? Why is it always Ian Rappaport? Why is it always Schefter or whoever that breaks these stories? And so it's nice that we get one locally. But we have been telling you, people that have been listening to this show, that letting T. Higgins get to the market would be malpractice by the Bengals from an asset management perspective, even if their plan wasn't to keep him around. You just tag and trade him. That should have always been perceived as a worst case plan. So unfortunately for fans of other teams, probably Patriots fans, I think, judging from the reactions that I saw on social media immediately after this story went out, it was never really a thing that he was just going to get to free agency and get to the open bidder. It would be severe malpractice in the first place. And then the responses to that were, well, this is the Bengals. We're talking like, come on, guys. They know when they have an asset. They're very stubborn about assets when they think they have assets and getting rewarded for having those assets. And you could point to Jesse Bates, certainly, and the fractured relationship there. But the big difference here is, one, a positional value thing to some degree, but two, it's David Mulligetta is not in the picture right now. And as you talked about with the agent change, that is a massive part of why this path for T. Higgins on the franchise tag this time around is so different from last year.
That's a big factor for sure. And I think the vibes feel much differently, which we could talk about. But before we do that, I think you mentioned the other teams. I don't think T. Higgins was nearly held in as high regard as he is now. It last year. And it's because you're looking at T. Higgins, maybe Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin coming off of a torn ACL, and who? It's just much different. The market feels different. The draft isn't as awesome. You don't have Malik Neighbors plus Marvin Harrison Jr. plus a Brian Thomas falling to the 20s in the first round, Lad McConkey. Like, think about all the guys, and I know I missed a couple there, but that were in the top of the draft that you were like, oh, these guys are definitely going to be good. And you combine that with what we have in free agency this year, the draft not being as good. And I just think T showed people something this year. I know a lot of Bengals fans look at it and say, oh, well, 12 games. He's played 12 games in each of the past 2 years. Agreed. Missed 5 games in each of the past 2 seasons, 10 total. And it's like, all right, well, is he injury prone? Like, what's going on? Well, yeah, he's dealt with some soft tissue injuries. He also had a career high 10 touchdowns. I feel like every single one of his catches went for a first down. It wasn't true. Not all of them went for first downs, to be clear. But he was catching stuff over the middle. He was really strong after contact, I felt like this year. Like, I still think his best football is probably ahead of him. And so I do think his value just across the league feels different. Part of that is the market and what's available. And I think part of that is T and what he showed this season. He leveled up a bit. And I do think that his best football is ahead of him. And the Bengals see that too, certainly. They see the market. They see everything around it. And this asset in T. Higgins, and I don't think they ever, once they really let the dust settle and looked at everything, I don't think they had any intent of letting him hit the open market.
Yeah, you talk about the way he leveled up this year. We were talking about that going back to training camp when I was in town last year and got to see T. Higgins in person in training camp for the first time last year before we got to see him in any games. It was obvious that, to me, his athleticism took another step last year. His movement ability, he was just moving better in camp. And I think his ability to separate on the routes where the Bengals ask him to separate, which largely slants and breakers from T. Higgins, comebacks, sure, certainly as well, part of his game. But that was all, I think, better. And I think maybe even more impactfully or more noticeably, he was running hard after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a big aspect in terms of talking about, the amount of catches he had that went for first downs. He's a big player for a wide receiver. He's got size on a lot of corners that he faces week in, week out. And so putting that size to use in running through some guys was pretty fun to watch with T. Higgins this year, part of that leveling up. Let's talk about T's perspective, as he assuredly knows this. If you know this or you're able to publish it, how do you think T is feeling today? Do you think that there was good communication done? Do you think that, think back to last year and how he felt after being franchise tagged the first time? How do you think T's feeling about this?
I think he knew not only that it was possible, but in a large part likely that this could happen. And it still doesn't necessarily need to happen. I guess that's an important part here too. They could find common ground on a long-term deal. The guarantee is that they're guarantee. See what I did there? That T will not get to the market. They're not going to let him get to the market. They'll tag him before that March 4th deadline. The tag window opens up, full disclosure, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's February 18th, and is open for 2 weeks, March 4th at 4 p.m. And so by that 4 p.m. deadline on March 4th, and it could come much sooner than that, it's kind of up to the Bengals. And that's where the negotiating part of this comes in. if I'm T, and I do think T wants to be in Cincinnati, this is part of why you changed agents, is you didn't want it to be as ugly. And I think what David Mulugheta would do on a second straight tag would say, all right, let's get you out of there and let's go get you a deal. And that would mean a trade demand. I don't anticipate that happening here. I think that Rocky Arsenault in Alliance Sports, their plan is to get T a long-term deal in Cincinnati. And where those talks are, I do not know, full disclosure. But knowing that you're going to get tagged now, knowing that that's the plan, I think that does set the stage to get something done long-term. And I really, maybe I'm crazy here, I don't think it should take that long. I think we kind of know what the T. Higgins market is. And that's why you're seeing those reports that he could hit that $30 million per year mark. I think he would have if he were to get to free agency. Is he going to be mad if the Bengals offer him $27 million per? Like, I wonder that. I wonder what he's looking for. I wonder what the Bengals are comfortable with. But I do think that both sides are hoping to get to a long-term deal, which is the biggest difference between last year and this year, Jake.
Yeah,
I mean, last year, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's worth underlining, that is the key difference. But there are a number of other points that I wanted to get to and what you just said. So if you wanted to complete that thought before I jump in, go for it.
Yeah, the biggest difference is he was tagged last year, and I don't think there was really any motivation on either side. As weird as it sounds, like, of course, T wanted a long-term deal. I'm not sure there were talks, period, to be quite honest with you. I would not be shocked at all if there were zero talks from a long-term extension standpoint. The plan here is the opposite. I think both sides want to get something done. That's the desire. We'll see. Still needs to come together. But I think the intention feels much, much differently than it did a year ago.
Oh, 100%. The plan has been for a while now to try to get a long-term extension done with T. Higgins. Now, there's so many angles here, I think, to still uncover, one of which is what the franchise tag does to the Bengals from a cap perspective. I want to make sure we get to that as well. And it's something that we'll cover again when and if the Bengals officially apply the franchise tag to T. Higgins this year, because it does carry a cap burden for 2025 until something is resolved, whether that's an extension or a trade. But in terms of timing, say that there's an understanding between the Bengals and T. Higgins that there's a mutual desire to get a long-term extension done, which I believe there is.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned last year that wasn't the case. The Bengals last year put the tag on T because they kind of threw their hands up and said, you know what, we're not even going to, we're too far apart. Here's a tag. We don't have to worry about it anymore. You know what's going on. And the timing will be interesting this year. We might see it early again. We'll see when the tag or when and if, I guess, in case they get an extension done first. But why I don't think an extension will get done first is that the agent and the player are so incentivized to at least put up the appearance of a fight.
Yeah.
Even if it's not directly a fight. If you are an agent or an agency, which is certainly involved in this negotiation, right? Rocky Arsenault, the agency. You don't want to be seen as representing the number one free agent in the NFL, according to various rankings this offseason, and accepting a deal below market value, open market value. And he's out there floating to journalists that $30 million is coming from him, right? Like, that's coming from the agency. It's not coming from teams necessarily. So he's trying to set the market value, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we see agents do often by talking to media sources. Oh yeah, he could. We're expecting, somewhere around 30 million. And then you're going to take a 27, maybe 26. I don't know what the number, maybe it's even 28, something that is below what he could have gotten on the open market before there's even a franchise tag. You're not even going to make the team, try and do this evil thing that now you, the agent and the player, have to deal with. And they use a franchise tag, so they have this leverage, and they do. The Bengals do have that leverage of the franchise tag, but from an optics perspective, both for the player and the agent who wants to be seen by future potential clients as being able to get them the most money.
Yep.
They are highly disincentivized to try to get a deal done sooner than later. Like, they want this to go. The Bengals, on the other hand, still would like this to be done as soon as possible, even if they do have to go the franchise tag route as we're expecting.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Draymond Green's talking about an NBA championship. So we've talked so much about vibes. It was very important the Warriors getting out to the 12-3 start that they got out to. They went on the team trip, the camp to Hawaii. They built the chemistry. That was a word that was said out of the gate. We saw the tone and the precedent being set by the veterans, Steph Curry and Draymond Green, with the way they were playing in the preseason. I mean, anyone that remembers that game where they knocked down, I believe it was 27 threes against Sacramento, you remember the tone was set early in that game. That was no fluke. They were playing like that was game 4 of the Western Conference semis. I mean, it was something to watch. But Draymond, on the TNT broadcast set with Vince Carter, Candace Parker, and Adam Lefkoe surrounding him, he's getting pestered a little bit. And he just says it. He says flat out, I think we can win a championship. And then he says, I lied. We will win the NBA championship. He looked dead into that camera with a sea of Dub Nation behind him inside outside the confines of Thrive City, and said the Warriors are winning an NBA championship this season. Now, that is the definition of getting ahead of your skis. The Warriors right now don't look the part of an NBA champion. They look the part of a play-in team. They're 28-27. They are 3.5 games back of making the playoffs as the 6th seed, and they are 1.5 games up on the Phoenix Suns just to make the play-in and have a chance to win an NBA championship as a whole. But Draymond Green did say that it feels a little bit different, that this team has found their way since Jimmy Butler has been thrown into the fold. If we know one thing about Draymond Green, it's that he has experience winning and winning a lot. So he knows what a championship team looks like. And I don't think he would go out there and, I mean, I'm sure he's done it in the past, but how many stone cold guarantees has he thrown out on a team that's 500? A game above 500. I can't imagine he's done it. I remember the 22-23 team where the Warriors they were all right? They beat the Kings in the first round. It was they 5 or 6 seed that year. Either way, they were a road dog in the first round of the NBA playoffs. And I don't think he said a word all year about them being title contenders. He just kind of shut his mouth and said, I mean, they did start to pick it up a little bit, you know, him and Klay Thompson when Curry went for 50 in that game against the Sacramento Kings, game 7. And they all said, like, are you really going to doubt a champion? And may have given those subliminal messages there. But in terms of actually coming out and flat out saying straight into the camera, we're winning an NBA championship, I don't know how many times he's done it. Chat, you can help me out with that. You may have the counter over under 2.5. I'd probably take the over. But anyways, I'm wondering, like, is it just looking at 2 superstars, Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry, saying, hey, everyone else is going to fall in line. I'm going to take care of everyone else, and these 2 are going to lead us to the promised land? Is that what he's kind of doing here? Thinks Steph and Jimmy's going to be an invincible tag team together? It kind of reminds me of a story that Lorenzo Neal told me, the should-be Hall of Fame fullback, one of the best ever. You can hear him on 95.7 The Game in the Bay Area, former co-host of mine, and told me a story of Mike Silver, Bay Area guy, Bay Area reporter. It's a great one, right? He said that they all went to a bar one night, and it was Lorenzo Neal, It was Chuck Liddell, it was Ray Lewis, and it was Michael Phelps. Ray Lewis, Michael Phelps, Chuck Liddell, Lorenzo Neal, and Mike Silver. And Lorenzo Neal said Mike Silver would have said anything that night. He felt very confident out there. That's how I kind of feel with Draymond right now. He sees these two guys in the way that they can lead a team in different ways, right? Opposites attract in different ways, and says, oh, we're getting everyone in line here and we're riding these coattails to an NBA championship. Because he even said this is no big three. He basically said, like, it's Jimmy, it's Steph, and it's everyone else. I'm here to fall in line and help this team, help, ride these guys to an NBA championship. Now to the schedule. No one loves schedule podcasting. Look, it's NBA All-Star game. We got 4 days to figure out content before our next basketball game. Schedule's an easy one, but we're not going up and down, picking win, lose, whatever it may be. That's terrible radio. Instead, we look at it this way. It's better go now time. There's 27 games, no time for ironing things out. You're 3.5 games in the hole. You got to start winning and winning a lot. The good news is the schedule is favorable. Only 9 of the 27 remaining games are against top 6 teams in the West or the East. That means 18 games are against play-in teams or worse. So this is essentially an extended play-in. Draymond Green even said it. He said, like, these next 27 games, we're treating it like the playoffs or an extended play-in, whichever works. But you're going to have your chances to jump coming up here because there are a lot of teams that you're fighting for in terms of seeding that you will be playing head-to-head, specifically later on in the season. Like the last game of the year is against the LA Clippers. Put yourself in a position where you're a half game back and bam, you go into the final day of the regular season and all of a sudden you feel like the We Believe Warriors, right? Sneaking into the playoffs at the very end. Now it's different, obviously, with the play-in, but playoffs, 6 seed, that's what they're fighting for. Live to see another day. So this is your play-in tournament. Beat the teams you're supposed to beat. If you do that, then the Warriors are good. No more slipping up to the Nets. You can't lose a 17-point lead to the Spurs. You better not lose to the Raptors again. You better beat Miami in that revenge game. The Warriors have a lot of winnable games on this schedule. But they lost those same winnable games 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 2 months ago. They've lost a lot of these games. Now, that was before Jimmy Butler. He clearly makes a huge difference. He brings an it factor to this team, and we're going to talk about the play of Brandon Bajemski and Buddy Hield coming up, and I think Jimmy Butler's addition affects those two in a positive way tremendously with the gravity that Butler brings specifically in the paint area where he can free those two up for 3-point shots. But the Warriors better start winning right now. It's as simple as that. And to Draymond Green, who says that the Warriors are winning an NBA championship, kudos. I respect that. I want someone to go out there on national TV and give it to him. And Steph kind of said the same thing, but at the same time, he went from, I love someone that has that much confidence. It's Draymond. And then right after that sentence followed it up with, but he gave the old, but we still got a lot of work to do in figuring this thing out. So there's work to be done.
The hype around CJ Carr has been building since the day he committed.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
We are turning our focus to redshirt freshman CJ Carr. I'm going to dive into why his talent and upside could make him the best option, why his lack of experience might hold him back, and finally, my take on whether Carr will actually win the job or if he's going to have to wait his turn a little bit longer. But let's get into the case for CJ Carr to be Notre Dame's starting quarterback. I think the first one is pretty obvious. He has the highest ceiling of any quarterback on the roster. He has 5-star traits across the board. He's basically the ideal size for a modern quarterback, 6'3" and a lean 210 pounds. He's very polished despite the fact that he is the youngest quarterback in the competition. He has a quick, easy release that's technically sound. You could just tell he's been trained really well, right? His grandpa's Lloyd Carr. His dad was a backup quarterback at Michigan. Like, football runs in their family. They take it very seriously. And you can just see in the way that Carr trains that he has been training to be a college quarterback, to lead a program for a very long time. This isn't something new. This has been something that he has been working for since really he was a little kid. And that is very clear in his progress and in his development as a quarterback who is still very young. He might not have the arm strength of a Josh Allen or a Jamarcus Russell, but he certainly has the ability to layer the ball, throw a touch, and he can really put the ball anywhere on the field. Like, he came out during pregame warmups before the national championship, and he was throwing darts on 25-yard outs. It was pretty funny listening to Tim Priester, friend of the program from Irish Illustrated, talk about watching CJ Carr just throwing in warmups. And this is a guy who had not really thrown that much over the past several months because he's been dealing with an injury. We'll get to that injury in segment 2. But he's very impressive, especially considering the fact that he is still so young. He just has a ton of raw talent, and that is evident every time he throws the football. Like, I made the point that Kenny Minchie might have the best quarterback aesthetic. I think he throws a very pretty looking ball, but I think Carr is the most consistently accurate of any of the quarterbacks on the roster. It's not just his throwing ability, though. I think he's got like the perfect skill set for a modern college quarterback. He's a polished pocket passer, but he also has the ability to extend plays and move the chains with his legs. Like, you can't really just have a pocket passer anymore at any level of football. I think that type of quarterback is sort of aged out of the game. You need to be able to use your legs, be an athlete, and Carr is certainly an underrated athlete. He's not going to be used a ton in the designed run game. It's not going to be like Riley Leonard, but he is certainly capable of keeping it on a read option, and he provides an element of unpredictability to the offense. Like, defenses will absolutely have to take into account his running ability when they're defending him, because he can tuck it and run it. You saw that on his high school tape. He was more than willing to do that. We saw him in the spring game last year run a little bit, but he can make throws on the run. He can make throws off platform, and we saw that in the spring game last year. He played for both teams in that game, and he was really the story of the game. He finished 15 of 23 passing, 165 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. His touchdown pass to Micah Gilbert was probably the best play of the day because he threw him open and had to split 2 defenders who were bearing down on the receiver. Now, granted, we should point out that he wasn't playing the ones out there on defense, but still, it took guts to throw that ball, and then he executed it perfectly. He can loft the ball deep, but he also can throw a rope across the middle as well if he has to. And he hit Deion Colsey in stride across the middle on a play in the second quarter. It was actually really fun going back and rewatching a lot of the plays from that spring game, and you realize just like, wow, Notre Dame has so much talent in the quarterback room. And that is not something we could say just a couple years ago. Think back to 2022. Things have certainly changed for that room, and Carr is another example of the young talent that they're bringing in to really improve that room as a whole. So I think when CJ Carr has the ball in his hands, like, he is in total control out there. There were times where he held it too long and got sacked, but he's never running around for his life, okay? And he's going to make some early mistakes. That happens, but I just love his command when he's out there on the field, and I think it's because he's poised and mature beyond his years. And he was like that as a true freshman. Now going into his redshirt freshman season, he's already shown leadership. He's shown that he's confident and that he has a high football IQ that could allow him to handle the pressure of being the starting quarterback right away. That is not easy. And as I mentioned earlier, he comes from a football family. His grandpa won a national championship as the head coach at Michigan. His dad was a backup. He understands what it takes to succeed at this level. He has seen it all of his life. Like, none of this stuff is brand new to him. It might be, the experience might be new, but he's seen it. He knows what it takes, and his entire life has been spent around the game. And you could tell from the way that he played in high school that he has a very high football IQ. They ran a pretty advanced offense for his high school in Michigan because he was capable of running it and leading his offense. And he also showed natural leadership ability when he was a recruit, because he was the leader of that class. And you always want your best player to be the leader, and that was certainly the case for CJ Carr in his recruiting class. And I think one particular moment really stands out to me. When Tommy Rees left to take the job at Alabama, that was a big blow to CJ Carr, because I know that everyone thinks that Tommy Rees couldn't recruit quarterbacks, and certainly he missed on a few of them, no doubt about that. But Tommy Rees and CJ Carr had a great relationship. Reese really wanted Carr. Carr loved Reese, and it felt like they were destined for a bright future at Notre Dame. But then Reese takes the job at Alabama, and I think that CJ Carr had to really reevaluate his situation because he had formed such a strong bond with Tommy Reese. But he had also developed a strong relationship with Marcus Freeman and believed in his vision. But around that time, that was when the whole Andy Ludwig debacle happened, and Notre Dame botched that offensive coordinator search on a very public level, right? We all remember that. That was not a whole lot of fun when Colin Klein turned him down, and then they bring Andy Ludwig to the hockey game. Everyone thinks it's going to be him, and then he doesn't get the job because of the whole buyout and all that whole thing. And then Notre Dame had to essentially settle with Jared Parker to be the offensive coordinator. And I don't imagine that CJ Carr and Jared Parker had a very long-standing relationship prior to that. CJ Carr could have wavered at that time, and maybe he did privately. Maybe he really reconsidered his options and whether or not he should go to Notre Dame because of the way that was handled. The first season under Marcus Freeman didn't go that well on the field because they went 8-4, and there were reasons for CJ Carr to have questions about the future of the Notre Dame program. He didn't know that they were going to be playing for a national championship in 2 years, but he didn't do that. He kept the class together. He remained steadfast in his belief in Notre Dame, in the direction that this program was headed. And not only that, he rallied the other recruits around him. And I think that says a lot about his character and also his leadership ability, because for whatever he was feeling internally about the situation, he certainly never let that get public. And he led the class the whole way, helped recruit other talented players to come to Notre Dame. And you love to see that, right? Because there was a moment last year when Notre Dame was recruiting Deuce Knight pretty hard, and it looked like he was the leader in the class. But then he strung them along, was taking all those visits to Auburn, but was not being fully transparent with Notre Dame. Like, that was a mess of a situation. That never once happened with CJ Carr, even though Notre Dame gave him reasons to waver. And I just think that really stands out to me, and the way that he handled that whole situation was just extremely mature. So it's not just his talent and his ability. I think that what he possesses just as a person and as a leader, like, that's what you need in a quarterback. And if Carr is truly the future of Notre Dame football, I think getting him on the field early could accelerate his development and set the Irish up for long-term success. Like, the best case scenario for CJ Carr, one that would be great for him and great for the Notre Dame football program, is that he follows the path of other great quarterbacks to come through college in recent years, like a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. Both players redshirted their freshman season, and then they came in as the starting quarterback in their second year as redshirt freshmen. They played 2 seasons of terrific football in college. Then they were the top players selected in the NFL draft. Bryce Young backed up Mac Jones in 2020. Then he started the whole season in 2021. And in that year, just his second year in college, he threw for 47 touchdowns, nearly 5,000 passing yards, and just 7 interceptions. CJ Stroud appeared in just 2 games in 2020, sitting behind Justin Fields. Then he won the starting job in 2021, threw for 44 touchdowns, 4,400 passing yards, 44 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Bryce Young became the first overall pick after his 3rd season, and CJ Stroud was right there behind him at number 2 overall. This is the best case scenario, but it's also proof that you can come in as a redshirt freshman and dominate right away. Notre Dame has not had a quarterback drafted that high since Rick Meyer back in 1993, and they have not had a quarterback drafted in the first round since Brady Quinn in 2007. Carr might have the best chance to break that streak, and if he's able to beat out 2 guys who are older than him in just his second season, he might be well on his way to reaching that status.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, how about you combine those live bets into a same-game parlay? I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps me in the moment. Every exciting bounce of the ball, every late-game rally, every clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you get paid, and when you win, you get paid instantly. You get paid. You get paid. As we draw closer to the NCAA tournament, now's a great time to take a look at the Final Four odds. Auburn and Duke lead the way. -150 and -115. My goodness. Maybe a more intriguing play. The Terrapins of Maryland at 10-1. Analytics love the Terps, as well as the Kentucky Wildcats, who sit at 8-1 to make the Final Four. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
The Florida Gators have hired their secondary coaches.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators.
We'll start with Darren Wilson on paper, right? Now, I'm trying to do this with as much of just on paper and information that I've been given when I ask people for responses on players or coaches or whatever it may be. But Darren Wilson on paper, we can look at this and say, because again, when we talk about recruiting ties for guys that don't have extensive recruiting experience, because while Darren Wilson has been on coaching staffs for 8 years, some of those were a GA. And especially 8 years ago, 7 years ago, GAs weren't doing much of the recruiting work, right? So when we talk about the recruiting stuff for Darren Wilson, there's really not much. So we're going to connect some dots, right? He's from Louisiana. That should help recruiting there because a lot of recruiting is not just, oh, are you a good salesman? It's, do you relate to me? You know, are you someone that looks like me? Is that kind of representation there? Because if it's not, that matters. That creates new barriers. It doesn't make things impossible, but it does make things more difficult. And so with Darren Wilson, you've got the Louisiana ties of now Louisiana players will probably relate to him better than they would have related to even Will Harris or any other of the DB hires, right? So, which I will also say this for Florida and the state of Louisiana specifically, LSU did not do a good job this past recruiting class of keeping players in Louisiana, which is a thing that they have historically been. I'm going to say this, okay? LSU has, well, and by historically, I mean like the past like decade plus, LSU has had maybe the biggest stranglehold on a state than any other program because it's just LSU as the Power 4 program and for a while Power 5 program. It was just LSU. Texas, you know, there's Texas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M. There's other schools in the state. Florida, there's the Big Three, and now UCF. Georgia, there's at least Georgia, Georgia Tech. Alabama, Auburn. California, there's USC, UCLA, Stanford. There's all these schools in all these states, but Louisiana has always been LSU. And this year was the first time that they really did a bad job of retaining talent in state. Now's the time to strike when they're still reeling from that. And so Darren Wilson could go in there and steal a kid out of Louisiana if there's a blue chip player that he's interested in. So there's that. He played at Southern Miss, which Mississippi is not just like, oh yeah, there's 25 blue chips out of Mississippi every year. That's not the case, right? There's a few blue chips, but they're really good football players. And I think that it was I think Mississippi has the highest blue chip player per capita or whatever it is, just because there's not like Mississippi's not a densely or heavily populated state, but considering that they have a pretty decent number of blue chips for a not well populated state. Playing at Southern Miss, I'd imagine that especially paired with saying, hey, I'm here on behalf of the Florida Gators, would help you get in the door of those high schools. Having that tie of, hey, I lived here for 4 years while I went to college and played football in this state. I came from out of state to come here. I'd imagine all that plays a part, right? So Darren Wilson, on paper, should be able to go into Louisiana, should be able to go into Mississippi, and should be able to, of course, go into Florida and recruit there. He's got defensive coordinator experience for 2 years at McNeese State, which honestly, I don't even care how it went. I don't care about any of that. And I spoke about this yesterday. For me, it's just really tough to judge a guy hardly on what he did at the place when he was there for 2 years, right? Especially when it's not a place that I'm tied into and always looking at. Like if it's Florida, I could judge a guy based on a year, even 2 years. Like I'll hear things about them. I'll know about them. I'll be able to give my opinion live as things are happening. But what he did 5 years ago at McNeese State, not going to be able to give a valid opinion there, especially when I know how things played out. Arkansas. Let's get to Arkansas, where he was for 2 years. I don't care about any recruiting things, whether good or bad, it means nothing to me with Arkansas. And you'll hear me talk about this a little bit tomorrow on the portal with Brian Smith, where, and I'll probably put it on Locked On Gators as well as a bonus show, but you'll hear me talk about that, where Arkansas, I don't care anything about recruiting in Arkansas because, one, they've been dealing with the same thing that Florida's been dealing with as far as like Billy Napier being on the hot seat. They've been dealing with that with Sam Pittman. All right. Every year they think Sam Pittman's going to get fired, and he should absolutely be fired before Billy. Let's get that clear. So there's that. NIL, horrible at Arkansas. They can spend the money. They have people that are willing to spend the money. They've spent it on coaches with basketball, right? But they don't with football, and they've consistently lost players because of NIL. I can't fault his recruiting for that, right? Like, I can't say he's a good or a bad recruiter if they're not willing to pay kids. So I say all this to say that on paper, Darren Wilson should be able to go into multiple states and establish some sort of pipeline there. On paper, Darren Wilson has defensive coordinator experience and is coming here and was recently hired to be a defensive coordinator again and is coming here to be a position coach. On paper, this is a really good addition, right? And the thing is that the only question mark I truly have about him is the recruiting. On paper, he can go out there and go into multiple states and have some kind of leg or foot in the door, right? But it's about actually going out there and doing it. Like, you do still need to be a good salesman. Even in the era of NIL, when you can buy players, you still do need to be a good salesman, because the way that recruiting usually works is not usually, oh, whoever pays me the most, that's where I'm going. It's, these are the 8 schools that I'm willing to go to. Whoever pays me the most from these is where I'm going. That's how it goes. So you still have to get yourself into that list where you can go, hey, fine, we're in the list. Let's pay and let's get them. Like that's what you got to try to do there. That's the part where it's like, you got to be a good enough salesman to get the kids. That's where it comes in. So for me, it's just about actually seeing him put it into action recruiting wise. Again, I've spoken to multiple people at this point, and they've all said positive things about him. They've all complimented him as a person, as a coach, all that. Now it's just about putting it together as recruiting. I feel good about him as an on-field coach. Based on what I've been told, I feel good about him as an on-field coach. It's just a matter of, how is he going to play out his recruiting? I don't know. I really don't. I can't answer that. We're just going to have to wait and see. But as far as it being a good hire, so far I feel better about it than I do about the Vinny Sunseri hire. Easily, by far.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers.
Matt Steinecker left for USC. I think we all acknowledge the obvious here. That's a big loss. He's really good at what he does. You have to replace. People aren't necessarily replaceable, but really good people, you have to then replace them with really good people to keep the machine running. So Marcus Sedbury is going to be the new GM. That was just announced. He's been at Wisconsin since 2022. He's been playing a pivotal role in player personnel, revenue sharing, so kind of modernizing the athletic department at Wisconsin. Previous to that, last 5 years at Baylor, where he did connection to new offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes. I like this. So I know there was an idea that you have to go raid someone else's recruiting ace, Notre Dame, LSU, Georgia, to replace Max Steinecker. I think Marcus Sedbury, by the way, Dr. Marcus Sedbury, coming in, he's going to be a 30,000-foot guy. Strategic vision, strategic view. That's his role, managing these really high-level ideas of how are we going to run this program. And I think they're still going to go get a recruiting guy, boots-on-the-ground guy to help replace that aspect of Max. I think long-term this could be really good. I like the hire on the surface.
I completely agree with the 30,000 foot thing. I was going to say 10,000 feet, but I like yours even better, even higher. Look, the program, college football is going in a lot of different directions, and you need someone to kind of control the program from high up to take it into this modern new world that we're living in with NIL and whatever rules are coming out from the NCAA and whether the NCAA is even going to exist. There's so many things. So you got to have someone he's got a really good resume, was at Baylor before. He definitely is a guy that I feel like can run the program like that. I totally agree. Max is like up here, like he can do it all. And Sedbury now will have a different role, and then go out and get another guy who can focus on the recruiting piece, because college sports is changing so much. And if you don't have someone on your team and in your program that can lead it from that high level and really sort of guide you through the changes that are going to be happening, that's going to put your program at a disadvantage. And having a guy that's been there, 2022. So he's already been there for 3 years. He knows the program. He understands what McIntosh's vision is, and being able to kind of go through that, I think, is really critical. So it's not done yet. We've got to fill that recruiting kind of piece of it. But on the surface, I like the internal sort of promotion, bringing in a guy who understands the culture. And we've had a theme going about sort of getting back to Wisconsin, the way Wisconsin's done it with the Grimes hire and that kind of thing. And so I feel like this kind of goes along that vein, right? Like, keep with the Wisconsin guy, make some proper changes, and then really make sure that the program itself is in good hands.
Yep, I think it's really well said. A little more background on Dr. Sedbury as well. He was a D1 athlete at Nebraska. He was a track star. So he has he wasn't a football guy, but he has that perspective of being an athlete. He's been around kind of this middle of the country, Big Ten flavor his entire career, whether Nebraska, Baylor's not, but they're still Midwestern-ish. So I think it makes a ton of sense. I like it. Now, neither of us are probably experts on Dr. Sedbury and what this means. On the surface, it makes sense to me, is what I would say. I want to ask you one last question on the way out of the door, Rajiv. This is a question we got from from Bucks Dairy fan. He said, not a question, it was a comment. The Badgers have one huge weakness in basketball, defending the post. Two-part question. Do you think they have any other weaknesses? And do you think that is a huge weakness?
I think it is a weakness, especially in a particular way, right? Certainly defending the pick and roll when you play guys like Wolf and Golden at Michigan. But yeah, I think defending the post is a problem for us because we don't have the physicality that, let's say, a guy like Trey Kaufman-Wren has, or maybe some of the other guys in the conference. And Nolan Winter doesn't really have that physicality yet. Crowd doesn't either. So that is a weakness. As far as other weaknesses, I think it's really just the ability to score in the post routinely. We can score from three really well, and certainly Crowd can score in the post, but I've never thought Winter is doing enough in the post. I think he just should be given more opportunities. You've mentioned Tanjay in the post. We need to be able to score more with our back to the basket, which was a staple of Bo Ryan teams for years. And I wish this team did a little more of that. So I think just in the paint in general, not necessarily driving and getting the scoring, because we're doing that with some of those guys, but scoring with your back to the basket in the post. I think scoring and defending the post.
It's almost a little more offensive versatility. I can see that. I want to nitpick a little bit on, because there's a reason I put this on there. I think sometimes when you see people score in the post, you immediately put the eyes on Crowell, right? And it's very similar to a quarterback throws a pick, right? You look at the quarterback. It could be the left tackle got beat and he was rushed. It could be the receiver ran the wrong route. We saw some of that last year with Trechka Kahuna. A lot of our issues at the rim, it deals with perimeter defense to me. Like, it feels like quicker guards get in the paint, and then we look at Crowell for not blocking shots. We're not great defending we're not a great post defensive team. I actually think Crowell's okay positionally. When he gets to just play man up on a guy, he's big, he's a veteran, he knows what he's doing. He's not going to blank an elite center, but he's okay there. I think partially our perimeter defense is a huge component of this. And that's to me, that's kind of the weakness, right? Allowing people to get in the paint and then not be able to shut that off when they get there.
I think that's a very fair point. You're absolutely right, right? Like that is an issue that we have to fix. And it's not really something that's going to be fixed this year. We just have to deal with it and outscore the other team because that's just how we're going to win now. But yeah, no, that's a good shout. Because I agree with you. Even in the last game we just played against Purdue, I thought that there were definitely times where Crowell was positionally stronger, especially better than Winter in that positional regard. But yeah, hopefully we can slowly make some improvements and stop letting these guys just slash their way into the lane all the time.
Yeah, and that's also nitpicking. Like, I'll be very clear, this team is really good. Now, like, you can always find a weakness somewhere. This team is really, really good, and I don't know if there's many other weaknesses, which is a testament to how good this team is. It's deep, it's versatile. We could talk about the lack of a point guard, but the way Klesman's been playing lately, and Tanjay, Crowell, and Blackwell can all pass the ball pretty well. Kamari McGee, I don't know if playmaking's an issue anymore. Carter Gilmore's a pretty doggone good passer as a forward. So I don't know if there's too many holes on this team. I do think the perimeter defense and the post defense, to your point, those kind of work together. I think that is an issue we've seen. I think against really athletic perimeter defensive teams, we can get pushed out a little bit. Like we can struggle a little bit initiating our offense. We've seen that in spurts. But dude, this team is really good, and we're searching for weaknesses right now, which is a testament to how good this team is.
Yeah, and I will say, covering up some of those weaknesses, like you just mentioned with Klesman, kudos to him. He's had 6 assist games a couple times now, and knowing that he hasn't been shooting the three very well. I mean, he's on paper, he's like our one of our worst 3-point shooters, but he also is one of the most trusted 3-point shooters. It's kind of odd to see that he's 28%, but his ability to do the other things and create, which he's doing now, and penetrating and taking the ball all the way to the rim and finding passes, kicking it to the corners, like he's doing a lot of those things that are covering up one of those weaknesses. We talk about it's hard to change a team that much in midseason, but Matt Klesman's really doing it. I mean, he's really taking over that point guard position, and we don't want John Blackwell to have to do that, and that's good. It's good for him to be more of that 2 guy, and yeah, I think that we are seeing some growth, especially from him. And he really stepped up, kind of like Crowell early in the season, didn't have the best time, stepped up. Well, now Max is stepping up, and it's like this team is almost peaking at the right time. Like there is a path to a conference title. It is out there, and we can definitely do it. But starts tomorrow, right? We've got to get this win against Illinois.
Also be helpful if Ohio State doesn't airball a 5-foot shot against Michigan.
Unbelievable. I mean, I'm like, oh wow, what he got great penetration. And I was watching that game, Michigan. We really need, if you're not sure what we're talking about, Michigan should have lost to Ohio State yesterday, but did not because their point guard missed a 5-footer, airballed the 5-footer at the
airballed it. It's the worst shot I've seen in the history of basketball.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, how about you combine those live bets into a same-game parlay? I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps me in the moment. Every exciting bounce of the ball, every late game rally, every clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you get paid, and when you win, you get paid instantly. You get paid. You get paid. As we draw closer to the NCAA tournament, now's a great time to take a look at the Final Four odds. Auburn and Duke lead the way, -150 and -115. My goodness. Maybe a more intriguing play. The Terrapins of Maryland at 10-1. Analytics love the Terps, as well as the Kentucky Wildcats, who sit at 8-1 to make the Final Four. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Jair Alexander's career in Green Bay looks all but over.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast.
Jair Alexander likely on the way out. Rob Domofsky reporting multiple sources inside the organization frustrated with his lack of availability.
That's an interesting way to phrase it, isn't it? And when something like that comes out, it's just over. Because coaches generally understand injured players don't play. The only reason you go on the record to a journalist, an ESPN beat reporter, with that sort of complaint is if you believe there are times as an organization when he was healthy enough to play and simply didn't. That is a different kind of level. That is an accusation at that point. It is a suggestion that you are soft, essentially. And once that gets out there, once you tell that to a reporter, it's over. It's over. Here's the exact wording from the report. Multiple team sources have privately expressed their frustration. So now we're talking about, I came to talk to you to complain about Alexander's inability to stay healthy and or play through injuries. And that second piece is the piece. The play through part. It's one thing to get hurt. It's another thing to not want to continue to play while you are hurt. And for this team, for this head coach, that kind of thing will land you in the doghouse. And look, it's not the first time that we've seen, think back to the weeks where he was practicing and then he wasn't, and he was full go and then he was not. And Matt LaFleur, you could tell the guy has no poker face, him and Mark Murphy. He was annoyed at the whole thing. Very clearly annoyed. And maybe it was as simple as he was annoyed that at the circumstances. Man, we just can't catch a break with this Jair Alexander thing. I told you at the time on this show, I didn't think that was it. And I thought that it was weird the way that it was all being handled, both by, the medical staff, the way that Matt LaFleur was choosing to handle it in press conferences. It was all weird. It smelled. This was smoke. And then, you hear things about what's going on behind the scenes, things that people believe, things that people are feeling about the situation. It echoes what was reported in ESPN. We talked about it on this show. And there was a whole cohort of people who, there is this push now. We have to defend the players at all costs. So a player who's not playing, the pendulum has swung too far. And part of that is because there are jackasses out there that are saying, oh, so-and-so got paid, and therefore they don't want to play anymore because they got their money. They don't have to be out there. I think generally that is nonsense. And players go after, guys for not hitting their parlays or not coming through for them in fantasy football. And so there is a level of jackassery that we have to push back against, just as a football culture. But it has swung too far. Because there was a cohort of people going, he's hurt. What do you want him to do? He's hurt. And I'm like, are you watching the same thing I'm watching? Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? Are you watching the head coach clearly frustrated? This is not the first time this sort of thing has happened. It's just not. And go back and remember the weirdness around David Bakhtiari. And Matt LaFleur, oh yeah, he's going to be good to go, and then he's not. And then, yeah, we think he's going to practice. Oh no, he's not. And the frustration you could see build from Matt LaFleur. Now, look, like he ends up playing. Eventually, he played that 2022 season. He was going to start in 2023 and then got hurt again. And unfortunately, it looks like his career is over. But that was weird. And Matt LaFleur made it obvious. I wouldn't say made it known, but made it obvious. He thought it was weird too. We don't always have to be like, well, they're hurt. Yes, clearly they're hurt, but is there more to the story? What the team believes matters here too. Does the team believe that they can play? Now, look, your mileage may vary on that. The team has a different incentive structure than the player. So I don't even want to quite go down that path. But this is a situation that's more than just he can't stay healthy. It is not only can he not stay healthy, we think there are times when he was 80, 85, 90%, where we would expect someone making the amount of money that he's making, who is as good as he is, who is as important to this team as he is, to make a better effort to be out there. That is clearly the subtext of this report. And that is my understanding, at least, and not from everybody, but there are important stakeholders in that building who certainly feel that way.